Welcome to Toasting the Classics, the podcast where we take something that people call a classic and we talk about it while we drink something inspired by the classic. Then we're going to finish up by deciding whether it actually should still be considered a classic. This is going to be a bit of a double episode. We're going to do one part this coming week and then one part the week after. But what we're doing today is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. My name is Dave McArthur, and I've got with me today...
Happy to be back. My name is Bill Hodges.
All right, welcome back, Bill. I blubbered my way through saying what we were covering, which is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But as I'm sure most people are aware, it's both a film and a book. We're going to talk about the book primarily first, and then we're going to move into the movie. So, Bill, is this your first time reading the book?
I had never read anything by this author, by Ken Kesey, somebody who I wanted to read more of, but not a huge, really collection of pieces of work.
No, not at all. He wrote this one in 1962, and then I want to say like maybe 2 years later put out Sometimes a Great Notion, which is a story of a lumbering family. Lumbering family makes it sound like they're great big heavy people, but people who work in cutting down timber. What would you call that? What is the industry of? Anyway,
they've always wanted to be lumberjacks. Yes,
logging. They work in logging. That's what I meant to say. They are lumberjacks, and that's okay.
Cut down trees and work all day.
Work all day. Yeah. I read this one. I think I read this in high school, which is why I only have a vague and not great notion of what this book was about. And then I did read Sometimes a Great Notion sometime during college. I had a really nice looking Penguin edition of that. I read it. It's a long, it's 500 or 600 page book, and I just did nothing. I know it was about logging. I know as much as I would know from looking at the Wikipedia entry for 5 minutes. I didn't really take much away from that. Of course, it was, almost 30 years ago, but still, sometimes I just can't believe the things that I read and have nothing from them, like no recollection whatsoever of having read them. But did you listen to the episode by any chance that Clint and I did on the electric Kool-Aid acid test?
I did. I think it's been a little while, so you'll have to refresh my memory.
So
but that was done that was Tom Wolfe.
Tom Wolfe wrote the book, but Ken Kesey is a character in the book because his group called the Merry Pranksters got on their magic bus, the electric Kool-Aid acid test, and they drove around, the whole country, I think, but primarily in the Northwest, in the same sort of areas where this story takes place, and Sometimes a Great Notion. And so there's a lot of connective tissue between that and this. And at the time when we did that episode, I thought about, we should do Cuckoo's Nest at some point. So here we are, we're doing a double episode. Let's get this done.
He really is from that area. Kesey went to school in Oregon. Initially, it seemed like it was maybe Washington State. And that was where I think the narrator of this book, there's a bit of a detraction from the film, right? Bromden, who is more often at least, referred to as Chief, right?
Which is basically what they called every single Native American in those days. Like if you knew a Native American, you were going to call him Chief. That's just what people did in those days. But
despite numerous aspects of the book having that tone, what we would today, I think, definitely refer to as a little bit racially insensitive, we'll say.
I mean, certainly it would be considered by anyone looking at it in a very shallow way, definitely, right? I mean, the stuff about the black guys. I heard somebody complaining about that, and we should probably put a pin in that and talk about it later, but just to make the point, it is the narrator who's talking that way about the black guys. So he is a character. Like Chief Bromden is a character who, if you think about it, probably would have not much of an idea of black people being from a native reservation somewhere in the Columbia Gorge in eastern Washington. I don't really know that he said.
The book distinguishes between the other characters using, for example, the N-word, right?
Right, but it's
him and Bromden not using that, but definitely calling them boys.
He calls them the black boys constantly, yeah. But that, I'm not sure if that shows the racism of the author or whether it's supposed to be the way the character would talk. And by the way, also how the way that Randall McMurphy is described, that guy would be racist. The character like that in 1962 would use the N-word. It would be weird if he didn't. It would be inauthentic if he didn't. And also he uses it to tick off the one guy to get his fist fight. He wants to have a fist fight with that guy, so he uses it purposefully. Yeah, but anyway, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. So this is a book, like we said, written in 1962, takes place, I believe, in 1963, which can be dated by the fact that Sandy Koufax is pitching in the World Series, the year that the Dodgers actually defeated the Yankees. I think there's 3 back-to-back World Series between the Dodgers and Yankees, and the Dodgers got the third one. Yeah, so this is 63, and the book is the story of a recidivist, sort of tough guy who gets thrown into a mental asylum because he wants to get out of doing a work duty that he has that he's supposed to only have for what, 3 months or so for some minor crime that he committed. Gets thrown into the mental hospital. And just because he's so ornery, he gets into a confrontation with the Nurse Ratchet, who sort of runs the floor and is sort of a minor tyrant in the mental asylum. The two of
She's
them
definitely stern. After watching it a few
worse than
times,
that.
I would.
She's worse than that. We're talking about the book. Remember,
True,
we're
true,
not talking about the
true.
film yet. I think that the characterization of Ratchet and a lot of the other people is less obvious in the film. Weirdly enough, because you would think a film would be more obvious, but in the book, she's like some kind of a tyrant, basically. I mean, she's like in charge of these people. She wants to hurt people for no good reason other than to increase her power. And essentially, the main story is the conflict between her and Randall, narrated by this gigantic Native American guy. I think he's said to be 6'8", something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Just a beast of a dude. And the confrontation between the two of them. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the plot. What am I missing?
He goes in after is sent to this ward. He's originally on a work farm in the penitentiary for statutory rape, which he tries to say that he was guilty of, but was asserting that the 15-year-old it was consensual,
Right.
right?
Which doesn't matter with statutory. So
Not so much. I don't know how different that is back in the 60s, but obviously it doesn't it was inappropriate then, it's inappropriate now.
mhm.
So he
I
he
think
he goes in
people
there.
I think people talked about that a lot more back then. For instance, when we did the episode on Annie Hall, there's a line in there where one of the characters is mad at Albie's character for having to come pick him up when he had 2 16-year-olds back at his house, and he's bragging about how he has 2 16-year-old girls at his house. This film is not depicting this as being aberrant behavior, and it's in 1977. So I think that's an indicator of how much that particular moray has changed since then. So this is a confrontation between these two characters, and in the end, do we want to tell everybody who gets the better of whom, or who does get the better of whom? I guess is the question.
Well, certainly McMurphy ends up not coming out of it very, very well, right? He's definitely institutionalized, seemingly what would be for the remainder of his life, which was ended prematurely by
Which
Chief
ended up not
Bromden.
being a very long time, right?
Right. I think though had Bromden not killed him and taken off,
Mm-hmm.
that he definitely would have been in the hospital the rest of his life, right? Because they lobotomized him. After a few ESTs, electroshock therapy treatments, and after not really responding differently, Ratchet really trying to use the EST initially to get him under control a little bit, and that
Trying
really
to
didn't
ratchet up
function.
trying to
Ratcheted
ratchet up
it up.
the
Yeah,
tension, as it were. It's a continuing series of defiant acts that Randall does against Nurse Ratchet. He
yeah.
sets it up so everybody can watch the World Series. He sets it up so that they can all play cards in a certain room. He sets it up so that they can go on a deep sea fishing trip at one point
With the doctor,
with
and
the
and
doc.
and it was interesting how much the Kesey emphasized that Ratchet was like even controlling over others, a majority of the other staff, including the psychologists or psychiatrists in the hospital at the time, which seemingly in the 1960s, 70s, that would be a pretty rare thing.
So two things. First of all, yeah, she chooses the guy basically because guys keep coming into the ward and she basically tortures them until they quit because they're miserable there. But then she picks this guy as being particularly pliant, even though he's a doctor. And it that right there touches on one of the major themes of this book, which is I don't know how else to say it, female power. Like how can
Mm-hmm.
women hold physical and like moral power over men? I mean, there are nurses. I guess there's other nurses, but do they even speak or have any personality or anything? She's really the only female character, and she just dominates everybody
Yeah,
and
yeah.
is set up as this, like I said, this tyrant that he has to fight, which is a really interesting. I can't think of anything like it. Confrontation between like Randall is hyper male, right? He's like
Mm-hmm.
this hyper masculine, maybe even toxically masculine guy.
Very much so.
but not just toxically masculine. It's an interesting discussion because, like I said, who gets the better of who at the end? I mean, he ends up kind of sacrificing himself, but especially in the book, everybody's better off because of his fight. Is it toxic?
Was Billy better? I don't know that Billy was
No.
better off.
Well, is he worse though? Because his situation was
Yes.
pretty bad. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Billy's probably the one that ends up the worst because of it, but the chief doesn't. Everybody else on the ward doesn't. You know, her
Yep.
power is kind of broken forever in a
Hmm.
way. I think it
Hmm.
could kind of be seen as some sort of a metaphor of a fight against fascism or against any authoritarianism in a way.
Bronben continues to use the word combine as the machine, as the system, as the institution being very repressive. And we also have to remember that Kesey is going throughout the course of this a CIA
Right.
funded, supported mental health. While Kesey is working at the VA, is when a lot of I think his bringing in a lot of his ideas about the mental health system and institution in our society, at least in the day.
So let's try to unpack the word combine. A couple of different ways you could look at that. A combine is obviously meant to mean a combination of something in a lot of ways, right? Which could be any institution, i.e., society overall, or it could be specifically government. If
Yeah,
he's dealing with the police and he's dealing with the Republican government or just I guess the government at the time. It's not even a Republican government, but whatever, the United States government. But it also, and I don't want to get too much into the film, but it's definitely to the director who ended up making the film rang of communism, like a
mm-hmm,
direct reference to communism, because
mm-hmm,
that's where he
mm-hmm,
lived. He grew up in
mm-hmm.
Czechoslovakia and lived under communist rule. So Combine sounds a lot like a reference to that in a lot of ways. But then again, it's just government.
I was thinking of it more as in terms of the agricultural machine of a combine.
I thought of that too. Yeah, expand
Yeah,
on that.
just as the institution, as the machine that is kind of all encompassing and all controlling of these peoples, especially people who are being institutionalized as being super problematic. And so I guess I didn't I could see these other ways that it could be considered, but that was definitely I think Kesey's approach to it was more all encompassing of it being the system of whatever that system might be
I
and
think
what
he's
and
referring to systems in general. I think that's
yeah,
definitely where he was coming from. But yeah,
yeah.
I think that for that director, it resonated with him because of his personal experience of like the different methods that were used to control people and terrify them. But it's interesting that you say about the combine because I was thinking, oh, what is a combine? Just off the top of my head, I was like, what does that do? But it's that big thing that chops up all the wheat and then smashes
That's
it
right.
all together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be a metaphor for sort of chopping up people and turning them all into the same thing, like cutting down any stalk that stands up too high, kind of the way Randall does. You know, he's kind of
Bringing anybody back down to, okay, you have to conform. That was definitely addressed throughout this piece of literature is people who were not able to conform to what would be considered the norm of the day, right?
it's really interesting. I think we talked about this a couple of times before in various things. I think one of Stephen King's books or some of the other things that took place around that time in the 70s, which is, I think it's kind of alien to the way we look at the world today. That oh, I know what it was. It was Close Encounters.
Mm.
And why was Close Encounters like so the government is such a sort of nefarious entity, right? Because in those days, the left was afraid of the government. It was the left that was always protesting the government, protesting the war, getting arrested, you know, dealing with the police and things like that. And it's like flipped today. It's like now it's the right that hates government and talks about how government is bad.
Well,
And
unless the Democrat is in office, in which case it's the the right wing that are anti government.
no, no,
So I think,
I'm saying the right wing is anti-government today. It's
yeah,
flipped. Today it's the right wing that's against the government, and today the left tends to embrace the government because that's not really what the left is talking about today is individual rights. It's like completely flipped the script from the hippie days. The hippie days were like the left were libertarians, or at least libertarian about things that they wanted to be libertarian about, if you know, like, you know, smoking pot or whatever it was that they were into.
sure.
And today that script is kind of
Kool-Aid
flipped.
acid
Nope.
test.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The kind of things they wanted to do on that bus were against authority. And I think it's really interesting. Nobody ever mentions that. Everybody talks about how it was the Republicans that freed the slaves and now they're the racist party. But nobody talks about the script that got flipped between the hippie days and today. I just think that's an interesting observation that I'd like to hear more about from somebody. But I've come across it by going back to the 70s, 60s, and 70s with these books and films, and I've been like, hey, this is that the world has changed in this weird, subtle way. But
Well, I mean, from Ike, right, through into, Kennedy being assassinated and
mhm,
Johnson taking over, right?
mhm.
From then on, it was really, yeah, it was very anti-authoritarianism and the
Yeah, and it was building and building, and then I think Nixon is where the dam broke. I think with Nixon, everybody was like, you
oh,
can't trust the government at all. Like with Watergate, the whole country was just like, oh, the government's not to be trusted. Maybe we'll have a new era of people on the left not trusting the government if we get if we get some more Trump or possibly what's his face taking over after Trump.
we don't need to go there. We don't need to go into Vance.
It could happen. So
I think this next year is going to be pretty interesting to see what happens. If we get a change up in the house, we better
we'll see what happens.
drink.
That's right. On
Yeah,
Toasting the Classics, we don't just talk about something. We also drink a drink that's inspired by the classics. So what do we have tonight, Bill?
we are drinking a blended scotch that
Sweet.
was in the film. I don't know that it was necessarily discussed or mentioned.
If I remember what you were telling me, it was just one of the bottles that they brought to the hospital. We didn't really discuss the climax of the both book and movie, which is essentially that Randall decides to throw a party because he
Mhm.
and the chief are going to escape the mental hospital. And
That's right.
they throw a party, let some girls in, get a bunch of alcohol for all the guys. And then do we want to get into the details of what happens? It's a pretty big part of the story. But anyway, there's a party. It's an important party. It's a climactic part of the film. There's a bottle of Jim Beam that Turkle is drinking.
Hmm.
That's Scatman Carruthers, the same guy from The Shining, who also played alongside Jack Nicholson. It was like the shots looked the same, and I was getting stuck in my head, the two of them interacting in that way. What year would the Shining's more like 79 or 80, right? So that's
Oh,
after this.
yes,
So
it had to have been right.
one of the things that they sneak into the hospital is a bottle of J&B Scotch, which is, like you said, a blended Scotch. And blended means that it's not just one particular thing. It's actually more than 40 different grains and malts blended into J&B Scotch. J&B stands for Justerini and Brooks. It's really kind of inexpensive. And I think the cachet of blended Scotch has suffered quite a bit recently. I think most people sort of think of single malts as being superior. But that was not the case throughout history. Definitely, like when my dad was coming up, blended scotch would have been the thing that cool people drank. In fact, it's supposed to, this particular scotch is taken to represent sophistication and virility. So you got that, Bill?
Hmm.
Is this increasing your level of sophistication and virility?
Virility.
Virility, yes. Sophistication and virility. That's what it represented in Italian film, apparently, in the Giallo movies of the 60s and 70s. If someone was drinking J&B scotch, they were a classy fella.
Well, there are a number of royal folk mentioned on the bottle, at least.
Yeah.
So there's
Um,
that, and so
various Georges and Jameses, right?
that's right.
But more importantly, I think, to the Italian cinema was the fact that Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin were famous for drinking it. I don't think those guys gave it a whit about James the Sixth or whoever it was. Yeah, this is the favorite scotch of Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's character in The Thing. He has a bottle of
Hmm.
J&B scotch. We could have saved it for that. And also Christian Bale's character in American Psycho. This is his favorite drink. So cheers. That's some good role models there. I think I would choose. I think we're more like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin if I had to.
Who's Dean and who's Sinatra in this case?
It's a really good question. I got blue eye. Oh, we both. You don't have blue eyes,
No,
right?
I have brown eyes.
Okay, so I'm Frank Sinatra then. I probably sing more than you do too. And to be honest, I don't know enough about Dean Martin to say like what that qualifies you as. I think he's a big drinker and kind of a ladies' man, so that's not too bad.
But I'm all right with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Departures are significant, right?
Should we talk about the departures now, or should we talk about when we get to
To the film,
the
probably
comparison?
could. The way that the book kind of wraps it up. What I found really fascinating about it was just the interpersonal narrative and the kind of reflections and the going backwards in time with Bromden making these connections to things that he had seen throughout his life,
Hmm.
right? With growing up and with, I think it was the damming of the Columbia River, building of a dam there.
He has these vivid stories about his family and the spearfishing of salmon and drying them on racks and stuff like that, and what it was like to listen to his grandmother. And that was really striking, the story about when his grandmother died and the dad and the uncle went and exhumed her and like put her in a tree
Exhumed,
somewhere.
right? Hung her up in a tree, right? Which apparently was had some cultural relevancy
Well, I was just
for
trying
that group of Indians.
I was just trying to think what group of Indians it is, and I think they're just referred to as Columbia Indians, which is not
Yeah, I don't know that they
a
actually ever
group that
named them.
I'm familiar with. Yeah, I don't know who that would be or whether that's similar to the guys that we read about, Sherman Alexie,
Could be,
which is out there
could be.
past Spokane, if I remember right. So
Hmm.
it could be a similar native tribe for all I know.
Yeah,
And I can't remember who that was.
Coeur d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene, that's the tribe?
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
I
All right.
believe so. I
Maybe
believe so.
something similar then. Yeah, but those parts really stood out. I think in terms of the writing, in terms of me enjoying the prose, those are my favorite parts of the book. The parts
Hmm.
that are the flashbacks of the chief. I do really appreciate if you the characterization and things that are going on in the rest of the novel, but it didn't pop until I watched the film, and then I could suddenly put faces to names. I actually read about 75% of the book and then watched the film and then finished the book after watching the movie. So I actually was having a lot better time understanding what was going on with character dynamics after having watched the movie. It's just, I think it's hard for me to picture faces and imagine faces for people. I knew Jack Nicholson, right? Although
Hmm.
I have to say, I don't know if he's described as looking much like Jack Nicholson in the
I
book.
don't know that Kesey did a whole lot of description
Well,
of
he's
him
red
per se.
haired. He talks about him being redheaded all the time. He's like, I think he's
Yes,
basically supposed to be kind of a stereotypical Irish guy, like a great big,
Irish guy.
strong,
Yeah.
redheaded dude. And other than that, I was having trouble kind of picturing him.
Hmm.
I don't know if Nurse Ratched, her number one physical description is great big boobs, and that
Hmm.
isn't in the film. That's not discussed at all in the film. That would have been awkward in the film.
As was the attack, kind of the climactic scene
The
with
physical
Nicholson,
confrontation between the
the
two of them.
physical confrontation between them.
Now that I think of it, the great big boobs is the counterpoint to his hypermasculinity, right?
Hmm.
In a lot of ways, like we said, it's sort of a confrontation between like male and female versions of power in a way. So, what is he saying about the combine and female power? Like, what's
Her need, I think this is my take on it at least, that her need to acquire that power required her to cover up or at least very much downplay her femininity.
in terms of the boobs? Yes, I think that's pretty explicit, but
Because in the book it's very much it's described, she is very much described
kind of sexy.
yes, non-sensual or non-sexual.
And when he attacks her and tries to choke her, then her shirt comes open and everybody sees
Well,
her.
he rips it off.
Right. So it's like he's revealing her femininity in some way
Hmm.
as part of that physical confrontation.
And so taking away some of that power, but also revealing.
Definitely taking away her power. He ends up destroying her voice, or at least at the end of the book, she's lost her voice. We don't know if that's permanent. I sort of gathered that it was meant to be permanent, but yeah, I think so. I think that she's lost her power in a lot of ways. You know what it reminds me of is kind of like Cersei Lannister is a similar
Interesting.
portrayal of female power in a sort of way, like everything she does to maintain power. It's like she has physical power, but it's always commanding someone to use physical power, if you know what I mean. There's not a lot of direct use.
And Ratchet does that throughout the book, right? With
Ratchet does it
through
throughout the book. The threat of electroshock, the threat of lobotomy, the threat of getting the three black boys as they're referred to by the chief. They're why are they black, do you think? Is there anything being said there?
I think so. I think that there was pushing the power imbalance between the racial groups, between the folks who were there on the floor, on the ward.
Or utilizing the fact that they normally have less power in society,
Hmm.
make them willing to use power against people, maybe just thinking of the co-option of their need for power and their lack of power in real life to give power in this limited place.
Hmm.
And speaking of which, I also thought about a lot of the time Native Americans are used as a metaphor for freedom, especially kind of doomed freedom, if you know what I mean, like a metaphor for like freedom that can't last. Like that's the way everybody talked about Native people for hundreds of years. And I think that maybe that's why he's chosen the chief as a main character.
Well, and I think that dynamic, and I think that might be one of the most important aspects of this book in terms of those relationships is how throughout the novel and the film for that matter, he was seen as deaf and dumb, right?
Okay.
Couldn't supposedly couldn't speak, supposedly couldn't hear anything, and he finally accepts and acknowledges McMurphy as being somehow somewhat on his side, or at least someone he has can make a relationship with, for maybe for his own betterment, and certainly it turned out to be for his own betterment for Bromden. But I think that we didn't get that background with the film. We definitely get that with those when we're talking about how even as the government, the Interior Department folks come and are planning to meet with Bromden's father, and they don't even acknowledge him. In fact, they say Kesey specifically
In the book.
states
Right.
in the
Yeah.
book,
In the book. Yeah.
yeah, we don't get any, and we didn't get any of that with the film.
No,
Um,
I think in the film, I mean, not to get in, like I said, not to get into talking about the film, but he's like deracinated almost. And people call him an Indian, and he's
they do.
played by a native actor, but otherwise, there's really nothing. You don't get
his
any of
height,
that
his
background.
height, his height. No, we don't get any of that background. That's
I
what
mean,
I'm saying.
anybody
Yeah.
could call, right? I mean, we really don't get any of that interesting background that we get. That Kesey is obviously centering on purpose
Hmm.
his story.
Hmm.
And like I said, it's like a doomed tribe that loses their land and gets co-opted by bigger society.
Didn't have a voice. Was just the machine came in, the system came
Right.
in and just took it all over without them having a true voice.
Hmm.
Which for Bromden to then be deaf and dumb was, or mute, we should probably say instead of dumb. I think. Um,
Yeah, here you go, just blithely dropping the D word on people. Yeah, no, that's not nice. Also, Chief, when he's a kid, his mother is white,
that's
right?
right.
He's a
So
white
he's
woman.
only half Indian.
Right. She marries a native man, and she convinces him to sell the land and like leans on him and like kind of ruins everything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's another white woman ruining things for everybody, which no comment. That's kind of a theme, I think, in America. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying there, but people complain about the involvement of white ladies and things sometimes.
She a Karen? Is that what we're saying?
I think so. Yeah, a little bit in some way. In some ways, yeah. Complaining like, if you don't sell this land, I'm going to talk to your manager, to the chief of the tribe. Or
That's
I guess
right.
he is the chief of the tribe, isn't he?
Yeah, Dad
Pine
was.
tree that stands
Dad
tallest
was.
on the mountain or something like that is his name.
Yeah, tallest Indian in the Northwest.
Football player. Hopefully never had to play for the Redskins, but so
You
that
know,
hey,
growing up, I didn't actually understand that the Washington team was not from Washington State. I didn't actually
oh,
pick
that's
up on
fun.
that
Yeah.
until later in life
I
because I'm not
really
really a big football fan.
I was not like, well, I mean, that was my team growing up, right? And I just
Right.
never connected the two things until I was about 10. I could see where I was sitting in my mind's eye. I was at the game and I was looking at the scoreboard and I was like, I remember turning around to my dad and I was like, huh, that name is kind of is that okay? Like that's not particularly okay, is it? Like it just dawned on me it was referring to a person. I mean, I knew it was Native American themed, but I don't think I knew that was even something that people I think it was just a word and I didn't connect the two things till I was a certain age in some weird way. But it's
Well,
weird to think that
out west we have a lot more of that, right? We have, for example, we have locations that are named after very derogatory.
there was one I saw that was my friend was saying that he lived in Phoenix and they changed the name of a street because it used to be like Squaw Mountain or something.
Mhm.
And I was thinking like, well, why is
We had
okay,
Squaw Valley, which
but
was
but
a
why
ski resort.
is there some
So
history to
a
the
squaw is
squaw?
a derogatory term for an Indian woman.
Is it derogatory though?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. See, I
Yeah.
think I just learned that as being like that's the word for Native American woman when I was a kid. I didn't know it was an offensive word.
You ask an indigenous person, then
I guess so, but I just don't know the history. I don't know why that's particularly offensive. You know what I mean? Like any more so than saying Indian, it's just something like, why are you using that word or something? I don't know. I didn't really understand. It's disconnected when you're from the East Coast. It's not, you don't use derogatory words to refer to Native American people. So I don't know why it just seems like a word. All right. So we were just kind of opening up some cans of, we have an entirely other piece of media to talk about here, which is the film that was created from the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. This is a film that came out when? Did you do your research, Bill?
Came out in 73.
75. So
Oh, yo, no, you're right.
I think it's the
November 75.
second biggest box office hit of 1975, which can you imagine a film like this being a box office hit today? If something isn't for children and or idiot man children, it just doesn't make any money these days. And I say this as a big Star Wars fan, but that is Star Wars' fault. It's basically that was the end of there being movies for grown-ups that made any money. And this it's just amazing to me that this was a big thing.
Unless you're talking like blockbuster horror flicks.
But even blockbuster horror films are basically for teenagers.
True.
Like
I
if something
guess
doesn't
that's
appeal to
true.
teenagers, it's people aren't gonna, it's not gonna have a big. I don't know what horror movie wouldn't appeal to teenagers. They love that stuff. That actually brings something up. This movie was made for $4.4 million, and an unadjusted 1975 dollars, it made 163 million. That is a really good investment.
That's huge. Yeah.
That is getting back your money 30 times over if my ballpark math is correct. That's nuts. No, 40 times over. That's 40 times your investment if you paid into this movie. And it was made by a bunch of industry like insiders. It's
Mm.
borderline. The book is 1962, but there was a kind of a bidding war over getting the rights to do this film. There
Well,
was
and it took 13 years to make.
It took 13 years to make. Exactly. They were supposed to start making in the 60s. Do you know who lost the bidding war to Kirk Douglas to get these rights? Jack
Who
Nicholson.
was that? Okay.
Jack Nicholson wanted the rights to make this movie, which I was thinking, was Jack Nicholson famous enough in 1963, or did he have enough money to bid on this project? That I didn't
Well,
quite get.
I know that Michael Douglas
Michael
was a
Douglas was a
producer on it.
producer because Kirk Douglas is the one who won the bidding war. Kirk Douglas was supposed to do the film. Kirk Douglas was supposed to star in the film. Kirk Douglas was definitely a big star already because I think Spartacus is like 1960, right? It's before this came out, before the book came out, or right around that same time. So he definitely had the chops, but I was like trying to think, when did Jack Nicholson get famous? I wish I'd had it's Easy Rider, right?
Easy Rider. Was that his first?
But Easy Rider must have been late 60s, right? I didn't really understand that factoid, if I'm being honest. I'm relaying this factoid to the Toasting the Classics public, but I might just be talking out of my you know what because I can't really figure out.
That was 69.
Yeah, so how could Jack Nichols? No, there's got to be something else. Maybe the bidding war went on. No, because like you said, they were working on making this film for 13 years.
Yeah.
And maybe it went back on the market at some point. Maybe the original. Anyway, so this is a movie that everybody knew should be made. I mean, when you read this book, this is kind of the big question that we have to ask ourselves. Is this a better book or a better film?
I mean, my take is book.
Okay. Would you and I know this book today if
If it
the
weren't for the film,
not the film, but if the film hadn't been like the blockbuster and critical darling, by the way. This is one of the three movies in history to win all five of the top Academy Awards, which is Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Screenplay, and Best Director. So this movie took all five of those. Could you have a guess for what the other two films were that won all five? There's three films in history that won all five of those top Oscars.
hmm, I'm not even gonna guess at it because I don't know.
One of them is a film that we definitely grew up with is Silence of the Lamb.
Okay.
There's a little bit of connection between those two movies, between this one and that one, right? It's an adapted screenplay from a book. It's got like a classic performance of like a mentally ill person, essentially, although it's a little different, but there's a little bit of a connection. There's a mental hospital, multiple mental hospital sequences in that movie. But the other one is one that maybe we should think about doing because you and I have gone back in time a few times, and it happened one night. Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. It's a classic film. We should go back and do it. I saw it years and years ago, and I actually use. Maybe I should save it for the episode if we do this movie, but there's a bit where the man and the woman have to stay in a hotel room together and they're not married. And it's like the 30s when this movie is made. So he hangs up a sheet and calls it the Wall of Jericho and puts it between the two of them while they're in the hotel. And so when my kids were little and I'd be driving in the car and they'd start fighting, I had this box that we would take with us on every single road trip that was like all of our camping gear and stuff. And I would put it in the middle of the back seat and I'd say, it's the Wall of Jericho. Nobody's allowed to cross the Wall of Jericho back there. So my kids, one of the few biblical phrases they're familiar with is Wall of Jericho.
Ball
I
Jericho.
asked my daughter today, we were playing Trivia Pursuit, and I asked her. So it was a question about the New Testament, and I was like, "So would you? What's the New Testament?" She was like, "I don't know. I don't know what that is." Like, it's like the founding document of her civilization. She has no idea what I'm talking about. On some level, I feel like I've done both a really bad and really good job of raising her that she doesn't know what that is. But I'll leave it up to the audience to decide which of those things is true. But those are the three films in history that have won these top five Oscars. So this is a critical darling. It's a box office smash, right? Unquestionably.
Unquestionably.
I don't think we could say it launched Jack Nicholson's career, but did it?
Well, what did he do between Easy Rider? He did Chinatown. Chinatown was pretty
Okay, okay,
huge.
then yeah,
Yeah,
Chinatown. Yeah,
yeah.
Chinatown is probably the one that really like put him into the stratosphere, if you know what I mean, of being like the it guy. Because he was still kind of the it guy when we were in college. No, maybe not college.
Well, with Batman for sure, because playing the
Yeah.
Joker,
Yeah, but not college, more like well into
it
the
was.
80s and then well into the 90s. Like as good as it gets is like 1998 or something like
Mhm.
that. So he's still banging them out. And you know, The Departed. Well, let's look at this filmography. I'm trying to think, have we done a Jack Nicholson picture before?
Because we haven't done Chinatown.
And actually the answer is that we have because we did Batman.
Chinatown was only 74. So he's just kind of coming off of the coattails of having done Chinatown.
Yeah, definitely.
Was
So it's Easy Rider, 100%. I've actually never seen Five Easy Pieces. That's supposed to be a really big one. Chinatown is the next really big one that I can think of that he's in. And then this one, yeah, this is right after that. But then The Shining, classic. I mean, like absolutely classic
1980.
performance. 1980, Terms of Endearment, another best picture that he's in, right? And has a really great like changes his tack and he's like an old man. He's already like sort of venerable in that one. I remember Witches of Eastwick being a big deal. Batman was like where I was like, okay, this guy. But then again, I was a kid, so of course playing the Joker is a big deal. A Few Good Men,
Mhm.
you know, you can't handle the truth. Like that's classic Jack Nicholson. That's 1992. Then you're going on. There's a little bit of a lull in the 90s, but then as good as it gets. I think maybe he won Best Actor, or that might have been even been nominated for Best Picture, if I remember right. And that's 1997. Then I think it kind of The Departed. Not a fan of The Departed. Have we had this conversation before?
I don't know if we have. You
I
weren't a
think
fan
that
of The
movie.
Departed?
No, I think that
Interesting.
movie kind of sucks. I don't.
Hoffa,
And then I guess he
what
kind
year
of
was
retired. It looks like he retired in about 2010. That's wild. I didn't really quite realize that.
what
But
year was Hoffa?
Hoffa, what year was Hoffa? That's in the 90s because I remember quoting that. Yeah, 1992. I remember meeting this guy who had a really thick Massachusetts accent, and I was like, I kept saying, "We're on you plenty, Mister Hoffa," when I was talking to this guy because
Just getting back to riffing on the differences between these two films. I mean,
yeah.
they definitely were focused on McMurphy far more than this sort of side character Bromden.
So there was an original version of the screenplay, an adaptation that was POV Chief Bromden. Like it started that way. I don't know what
Interesting.
that would have looked like. I don't know if there was an interior monologue or something. That is always a problem when people try to do that in a film. It's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why the original Dune film sucked. Is
Mm,
because they tried to because the strength of the novel is Paul's interior monologue is a great part of the book. I mean, he's thinking through
hmm.
everything. It's how all the exposition is done, and it's just not good in the movie. And I kind of think if I'm imagining what this would have been like, I think that would have been like that with the Chief.
I think that's right. I think it was a strong character, but yeah, I
I
agree.
think the Chief is a great character in the book, right? I think he's a great all this interiority and all of his background and stuff. I think it's probably my favorite part of the book, and this is why it's a great adaptation. I think is because they turned that strength and weakness. They flipped those. Film, I think, is capable of taking 10 different characters and characterizing them so much better with dialogue and also with
Mm.
remembering a face. I don't know about you.
Christopher Lloyd,
Christopher Lloyd is a character who isn't in the book. He's mentioned in the book, but
right?
isn't a big character. And Christopher Lloyd is a standout in the film.
Oh yeah,
I've
with
never
the
seen
cigarette.
just everything he
Yeah,
does is great. And
yeah.
he's not really a big character in the book. But I was thinking about this. I think that's the straightest I've ever seen Christopher Lloyd play. He's just a guy. He's a great actor and he's got all this great facial stuff he's doing, but he's not Doc Brown or
Yeah,
Jim from Taxi.
right.
In those, and it's weird that there's two Taxi alums in this movie.
That's right. Was that DeVito's first film?
Was this Dan? So they cast DeVito as Martini, because he had played Martini on stage in 1971. So it must have been his first film. If it's not his first film, it's his first big film or his first big role in a film, because he went straight from the stage version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to doing the film. And he's so young looking. He has
Oh yeah,
more
I didn't
hair.
recognize him at first. Yeah.
It took me a second, but he's very good in this, actually. You could see that he's a good actor because he has this facial expression that he does. I don't know how to describe it, but I've known people who were like, for example, on the autism spectrum, there's something about the way he's clenching his mouth
Hmm.
that seems very realistic to me. He's just doing a great job as an actor. And then later he becomes this kind of silly character. Like when he's I think it's Louis on Taxi. Is that the
Hmm.
character's name, I think? Louis is like a caricature of some sort. It's a great character. I mean, I think I've gushed about this show many times,
About
but there are
Taxi. Yeah.
5 or 6 of the greatest TV characters ever on that show. Like hands down, Andy Kaufman, and not to mention Andy Kaufman's wife, Carol Kane, right? Jim, there's Danny DeVito, Tony Danza just shows up out of nowhere on Taxi, right? It's a really good. Anyway, go out and watch Taxi, people who haven't seen it, but it's a great show. There's some connective tissue, by the way, there
With Danny DeVito and Tony Danza.
with the director of this movie, Milos Forman, right?
Hmm.
Also directed Man in the Moon, the Andy
Oh, interesting.
the
I
Andy
did not.
Kaufman.
I didn't know
So
that. Yeah. Yeah.
he basically ended up directing a movie all about Latka. I mean, to me, that's the thing Andy Kaufman's actually famous for, but I might be biased. Oh, Judd Hirsch. I didn't even mention Judd Hirsch talking about how good Taxi was. He's probably the number one character, and I didn't even think of him because that's how good everybody is on that show.
So the fishing scene,
The fishing scene. Yeah, big difference between the book and the film, right?
huge differences there. Yeah, right. They go through this whole thing of convincing, at first trying to convince the guy who owns the charter captain or whomever he is, versus just going straight to the boat. To take a step back a little further than that, it's like they just hijacked a bus.
He busts out
They
of the mental
steal a
hospital.
bus. Yeah,
He busts
they
out of the
literally
mental
break
hospital.
out. Yeah.
But they have some kind of scheduled field trip, right?
Well, he and it was part of the competition and the breakdown of Nurse Ratched in the book is that he was going around, he was trying to
In the
convince
book,
everybody
right,
in the
right,
book.
right, right.
He was convincing everybody to pay for it, and initially he's like, "Well, I'm going to book. I have these two aunts who are going to book this charter for us,
Yeah,
right?"
right.
And Ratchet is like, well, okay, but you have to get enough people to sign up to pay for the cost of doing this charter, and it broke down to like $10 a pop or something like that. After which we find out that in at least according to Ratchet, that was him
He
trying
made a profit there, yeah.
making some money on the deal. But
So I don't
so
mean to, I don't mean to hijack the discussion of the fishing trip because it is a big difference in the book and the film, but we didn't discuss the theme. I think this is the theme. The question of, is McMurphy a good guy? Because this is what happens with this scene is that they find out that he made a profit off setting up the fishing boat trip, right? So he makes some money off of it, but he's been making money off everything he's done for these guys. But then the question is, does that make him a bad person? Because I was reading the book, and then when I started watching the movie, and I was thinking, gosh, is this character just like a manipulator? Is he some kind of
mm,
narcissist? Is
mm.
his mental illness that he's a narcissist and he's just controlling these people for his own gains? And film, I think the book too, I think both answer the question in the negative pretty affirmatively. I think it's pretty clear. Oh, that's a stupid way to phrase that. Negative, affirmative, negatively.
Affirmative in the
I
negative.
really should have phrased that in a completely different way, but they answer that question very pointedly. I mean, he's not. He's sacrificing himself for these people. But then I also, when he ends up giving himself up in the film, it's mixed bag too. You're not really sure exactly what happened there.
I think there's more complexity. I think it speaks to the complexity of the character itself. Because is he taking advantage? Yeah, to some degree. He's totally sharking them with cards,
Right.
right? He's manipulating them to do things that he wants to do. But I
Mhm.
think ultimately those things that he wants to do turn out to be for the betterment of the group.
That's right. Yeah, I think so. This is kind of an interesting question. If you read Electrical at Acid Test or listened to us, I think that Ken Kesey might have been projecting himself onto this character. Because if you think about it, him having that bus there and freeing all these people, right? Taking them on this big acid trip all around the country, was it good for them? I guess you could make that argument, but he also fathered a child by one of the women that was on the bus with him. and did a whole bunch of drugs and hung out with a bunch of crazy people and had a great time. But then again, also spent all of his money on it. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
similar to the way that McMurphy is depicted. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of you're sort of asking yourself, is it's almost like some kind of cult leader, right?
To some degree. I mean,
Or religious
he's
leader or
definitely
something.
taking on a leadership role. I could see that. A challenge to again with this oppressive system that was in place and that I think that Kesey was really entrenched in combating
So he's
was
unquestionably a challenge to the system, no question about it. But when I say cult leader, what I mean is like, is he a cult leader like David Koresh, or is he cult leader like Jesus? Jesus is a cult leader. From the depiction of Jesus that we get, he's not somebody that was just trying to take advantage of everybody. But then again, they probably wouldn't depict David Koresh that way 2,000 years from now if he'd started a religion. So I don't know.